La et se es moi. I am the state. Louis XIV, seen in the center here. And also, if we look at the beginning of our slideshow, Louis with his sexy legs, one of his proudest features, and notice the high heels. Louis XIV is the I am the state. He is literally, that is what he believes. He believes he is the most powerful man in France. He takes it further by saying that by I am the state, it's not I serve the state, France is me. So what do we know about Louis? Louis became king at age 4. Now, of course, you're not going to have a king at age 4. So his mother will become regent, which means she will rule in his place. But the big one, and you may want to look at our vocabulary, is Cardinal Mazarin. He will actually, with Louis's mother, run France until Louis is able to actually take over the ruling. This event here, the Fronde, is probably one of the most important events to shape Louis's young life. The Fronde, this noble revolt, put Louis in great danger and will influence him the rest of his life. Imagine being a young king or even just a child, and you wake up in your room and there are all these people shouting at you, forcing you from this bed and making you appear before them. So as a result, the revolt was eventually put down. Cardinal Mazarin did that, but Louis will vow that this will never happen again. He is determined to curb the power of the nobility. When Louis becomes king at the age of 22, one of the first things he's going to do is he doesn't appoint a chief minister. He decides he's going to run the state himself. A chief minister had always been a member of the aristocracy, comes from the ruling class of France, but Louis ends that. He also will rule with a council, even though he will have sole power. But what will happen is instead of using aristocracy, he's going to appoint middle class men to this role. And that is really going to upset the nobility, but there's nothing they can do to it. And he's going to give the nobility some other jobs. He's basically going to make them his personal servants at Versailles so that it gives them the appearance of wealth. So he sells these noble titles to the middle class, because one of the ways that you keep power is by having a small group. When you sell your noble titles to middle class, you're expanding the group, therefore lessening the power. And at the same time, he is increasing government's powers. One of the things that we talked about during the Reformation, we talked about the Edict of Nantes. Remember, this was freedom in France. This was the Huguenots, those French Protestants, getting the religious toleration. Well, Louis XIV will end the Edict of Nantes. He will revoke it. He will revoke the Edict of Nantes. And what he will do is because he distrusted differences. Thank you, Kathleen. He distrust he distrusted differences. So he tells the Huguenots, these French Protestants, that their children will not be, they have to be raised in the Catholic faith. This is actually going to hurt France in the long run, because your Huguenots were a lot of your, well, some of them were from the aristocracy. They were also your bankers, your lawyers, your very, very highly skilled laborers. So France will lose a lot of them. In the short term, it doesn't hurt, but in the long term, it does. But he ends the religious toleration, and the Huguenots are forced to flee. And what will end up happening is France will become a Catholic country again. However, remember, this is not the Pope or the Catholic Church having the power, the king will have the power. Now, one of the things that Louis does is he moves the nobles to Versailles. This is Versailles. I'm going to show you 3 images. Versailles is probably one of the most beautiful places to visit. It's on many people's bucket lists. It is absolutely gorgeous. This becomes literally the seat of the French government. It's built by Louis XIV, and it's 11 miles outside of Paris. As we go back to the Fronde, Louis does not want to be in Paris. He doesn't trust Paris. He feels unsafe as Paris. It was a hunting lodge. We'll see a video in class on Versailles just to get the magnificent, but this is the symbol of royal power. And what he does is he forces the nobles to live at Versailles with the king, which sounds like a really good deal, but it really isn't. The more wealth you have, the bigger your apartment, but you're cramming all of the nobility into Versailles. And what the nobles did is he gave them the image of power. They wait on the king hand and foot. They're competing with each other to hand him his hat, to be the first one to see him in the morning, to put the covers on him. And it's this illusion of power. Really, they're paying for this privilege, but they're really not having this privilege. And what he's doing when he does this with the nobles, his idea is to keep the idea that he has sole power, and he's keeping an eye on them because he doesn't trust them. But the other reason he builds Versailles is, remember, he's the Sun King. Everything revolves around him. And he builds Versailles to glorify the king, and he's also doing it to show the world what magnificent power France was and what magnificent power the king he was. Louis's legacy is a mixed legacy. France becomes a European power. 3 wars, France becomes very strong, very involved in Europe. Becomes the Renaissance. We talked about Italy being the center of arts and literature. Well, what ends up happening under Louis XIV, you have artists and musicians and writers come to Versailles and come to work. I mean, look at this palace. You can tell that the artwork is incredible, and when you see the videos, so France will become a leader in art and literature. It becomes a military leader in France. But these last 2 are probably some of the long-term effects. Oh, excuse my erase. Let me try that again. So these last 2 are going to cause the biggest problem, and these are going to not affect Louis. They're going to affect his long-term France. He leaves France in great debt. One of the ways that Louis gets away with it is the poor pay the taxes and the rich don't. So as a result, the poor will keep getting a crushing tax burden, and France will have this debt that never gets paid. Plus, with this tax burden on the poor, France can't pay its bills. And what happens is when Louis XIV dies, you will eventually have a French Revolution that will end absolutism in Europe.